Welcome back to the weekend. The first criminal trial of a former president is nearing an end. On Tuesday, closing arguments will begin in Donald Trump's 2016 election interference trial. After that, jury deliberations will take place. Depending on how long those deliberations last, we could have a verdict by the end of next week. By the end of this week. And Trump seems laser focused on Judge Juan Merchan, who's overseeing the case, unleashing a new attack on him just overnight. But as Politico notes, that could come back to haunt Trump at his sentencing if he were to be convicted. Joining us now, MSNBC legal analyst Christy Greenberg. She is a former federal prosecutor and former deputy chief of the Southern District of New York Criminal Division. And MSNBC legal analyst Glenn Kirshner. He is a former federal prosecutor and host of the Justice Matters podcast. Justice matters indeed.
Justice matters.
Okay. Well, first of all, Christy, how about what are we going to expect? Obviously, there's no court tomorrow. It's Memorial Day. Thankful to everyone who has given their life in service of this country. On Tuesday, court will resume. Is my understanding it's called summations in New York, closing arguments. What can we expect? Give us a prediction. And then we want to talk about some of this rhetoric.
So I think on Tuesday, you're going to hear two very different closing arguments. From the prosecution side, you're going to hear about the fact that in 2016, Donald Trump had secrets that he did not want the American people to know, right? That he cheated on his wife with two women. One was a Playboy playmate. Another was a porn star, and that he feared that the American people would learn this truth. And so he told his friend in the tabloid business, and he told his fixer to take care of it for him. He was at the center of all of that. He told them to pay up so these women would shut up. And it worked. And you're going to hear the prosecution point out that this worked. He won. And then he covered it up. And he made sure that the people who worked for him covered up what he had done. On the other side, you're going to hear a closing statement that's very different about a man who had secrets, but that man being Michael Cohen, the fact that he had lied to the IRS, that he had lied to banks, that he lied to Congress, that he had lied to prosecutors, that he said he lied to a judge. And they're going to say now he has lied to you, the jury. They will point out the fact that Donald Trump, the only person whose word, this is at least what the defense, I think, will say, the only person whose word you can take for the fact that Donald Trump approved the payment to Stormy Daniels is Michael Cohen. There's no document that says that. There is no other witness that says that. And there's also no document showing that Donald Trump actually paid for this, that the documents show he paid for legal services, and that's what he thought he was doing. And so I think you are going to hear them really focus on the fact that in order to have a conviction here, you have to focus on and believe the word of a liar. And you should not do that in this case. I think those are the two very different versions of the closings that we are going to see on Tuesday.
So, Glenn, to that point, we had Lanny Davis on our show yesterday, and he talked about the jury instructions being a key part of this, noting the jury instruction about what is evidence is key. A lot of people think you have to have, as a question, what was just asked me, direct evidence that Donald Trump paid reimbursements illegally rather than legal fees. So for him, a big part of this is how the instructions are set up, very much to what Christy was saying. Those arguments are going to be. Once you hear those arguments, the judge is going to say, okay, now this is what y'all need to know, and this is what you need to rule on. How do you see that part of it coming into focus?
Yeah, Michael, legal instructions are the kind of things that lawyers obsess about. Jurors, not so much. One of the most important legal instructions given in every jurisdiction every day around the country is that there is no way to look into the human mind to determine somebody's intent. That's why you get to infer their intent from their conduct, from their words, from who benefits from the commission of these crimes. I've always said, as a prosecutor for 30 years, I never had a defendant or an aspiring defendant announce before or at the time of the crime, listen up, folks, intent, corrupt, criminal. Got it? Now let me go do this thing. Not the way it works.
Right.
Legal instructions are important, but this is a common sense case, right? Who benefited from these crimes? Donald Trump. In fact, these crimes worked to the detriment of Michael Cohen. He ended up in prison once he was exposed as lying and committing a crime together with Donald Trump. Not to mention, he had to sneak around and take out a home equity line of credit just to make this dirty hush money payment. This is a common sense case. The jury's going to get it. Did Michael Cohen tell a whole bunch of lies in service to Donald Trump and in service to himself? You bet he did. But will the jury understand at the end of the day that Donald Trump was a co-conspirator in all of this? Absolutely.
Chrissy, let's talk about the defense, which you laid out for us, what you think that they'll do. You had a law school professor weighing in on the possibility that painting everything as a lie could actually back the defense into a corner, writing, if the defense portrays everything as lies, as Trump has claimed, they may paint themselves into a corner. If the jury believes, for example, that Stormy Daniels was telling the truth when she said she had sex with Trump, then Trump's denials may work against his lawyer's defense strategy. Talk about the sort of tightrope they are walking here.
Well, that was a strategic choice that it's unclear why they made. I don't think they had to get into the fact of whether or not Stormy Daniels and Donald Trump had sex. But we know that in the opening statement, the defense made that point that she was a liar. And so now that is an issue. And so I agree. They sort of bit off more than they could chew here. I think they should have kept it focused to the payments. Again, Donald Trump saying, hey, he didn't want to pay. There was some evidence at the trial he actually didn't want to pay her. They should have focused on he didn't want to pay her, and that's why he didn't pay her. And that this is Michael Cohen, again, kind of going rogue and doing his own thing. Do I think that's convincing? No. But that's kind of their best argument here, I think, to try and focus on that and not focus on everything being a lie, because that is a little difficult to, again, not everybody in this case is a liar. You really wanted to focus, if you're the defense, on just one person, Michael Cohen. And it was an odd strategic choice for them to have cross-examined a number of other people like Keith Davidson and Stormy Daniels so hard and try to make them seem like liars as well, when really there was only one person they needed to focus their fire on. But I expect the same in closing. I expect them to, again, be throwing up that everyone in this case is essentially is lying. I mean, you have to basically say that David Pecker is a liar, too, because he puts Donald Trump at the center of the Karen McDougal payment. You also have to say that Hope Hicks is a liar when she said that this was that Donald Trump said that the Stormy Daniels payment, it was better coming out in 2018 because it would have been really damaging to the election. You have to say that's a lie. Otherwise, that helps the prosecution's case. And yet the defense didn't really do that. They didn't really take apart the lies, the statements that were hurtful to them, and instead kind of threw up a lot of lies and, accusations against people that really didn't hurt them at all in their case. So I think there were just some strategic blunders here. I agree that, they should have focused their fire more on one person, really.
Well, there is someone on the defense's side that has been laser focused with their fire, and it is the defendant, Donald Trump, who has been consistently railing against the judge in some of the most racist overtones and undertones and whatever other tones we can find that I have heard. And he's talked about his other gag orders. This railing against Judge Merchan, I can't imagine that this is going to work out well for Donald Trump if, in fact, the jury convicts him in this case, right? Am I making this up? Anyone?
Glenn?
Yeah.
Glenn is like, you ain't making it up. You're actually not next because it's crazy.
So when it comes, let's say he's convicted, right? And let's say then it falls to Merchan to sentence him. Does the sort of additional behavior factor in?
It's not going to help Donald Trump. I think Judge Merchan will probably divorce all of Donald Trump's ridiculous rhetoric from his sentencing calculation. And I think Judge Merchan has done a remarkable job sort of professionally presiding over this case. The one thing that he said that disappoints me, and it still disappoints me, and it might factor into the sentencing in the event of a conviction, is when he found Donald Trump guilty of 10 counts of criminal contempt of court. Mind you, that violates the conditions of his release in his other 3 criminal cases.
Because he's out on bail. He's on bail.
Stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for that. But when he said, you know what? I don't want to put you in jail because you're the former president and you may very well be the next president. That was Judge Merchan announcing that he will not apply the law equally. And that kind of just was a dagger through my heart. But I do think Judge Merchan may be biding his time. And in the event of a conviction, I absolutely believe he will sentence Donald Trump to a period of incarceration, because without that, this whole endeavor has been for naught, and it will simply encourage tomorrow's aspiring dictator.
Does anybody have $20? I'm here to take up a collection plate for that sermon that Glenn just preached about the lack of applying the law equally to Donald Trump, because he is a former president. And you know, I'm no lawyer. I'm just a girl that one time had wanted to be a judge. But I can see, as clear as day, how there are clearly two systems of justice.
I can only imagine you on that bench as
well,
a judge right now.
The Lord couldn't, which is why I'm at this table.